If you are proficient in math, science, technology, engineering, that means you can solve problems. I don't just go there and tell you what to do. I can trust you to do it. How many people have you worked with that need a whole lot of adult supervision? You can't leave them alone to do nothing. I think that's a huge problem. It used to be you just go to school, do a good job, go to college, get a degree, find a job, stay there for 40 years, you get a pension and a gold watch. Glide path. Those days are long dead. And now we have to rethink education to teach young people how to use what they've learned, how to think for themselves. There's a report from the Aspen Institute that quotes a classic study called A Nation at Risk. And one particular quote from that study I think is very useful. It reads in part, quote, "If an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might well have viewed it as an act of war. As it stands, we have allowed this to happen to ourselves," unquote. That's from a report called A Nation at Risk, The Imperative for Educational Reform. It was written in 1983. That's how long we've been at this. Now, the news is not all bad about math. There's a test that's done year after year called the NAEP. And it's a test that's done to measure how America's students do in math and reading. And over the last few decades, we've gotten better. Not dramatically better. The scores kind of peaked around 2012, but there's not that bad. But the real test is one called the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA. This is a global test that gives kids all around the world the same questions on a variety of subjects. Compared to the other 80 nations that took PISA 2022, number one on the list by far, was Singapore. They got an average score of 575. We scored a 465. Average for developed nations is 472. Singapore got a 575. Now, if your kids are not great at math, I'm not telling you that you need to go smack them over the head and make them study for an extra 3 hours. I don't think that may not be the most effective way to go. But if you want to talk to kids about their future prospects in the world, man, what do I got to do to be able to get a job? Or do I just want to be an Instagram influencer? Or, well, okay, if you want to be an influencer, you can go for that. But just know the best way to be employable for good jobs in the future, you got to know how to think and you got to know how to write. Non-negotiable. You have to be able to know how to think and you have to be able to know how to communicate well, proficiently and thoughtfully. If you can do that, everything else is possible. Every job that does not require you to be a smart thinker, an independent thinker, is going away. Every job. Lyft and Uber are probably top of the list among tech, quote unquote, tech jobs. If we can fly a rocket to space with Jeff Bezos and William Shatner aboard and get them back safely, the debate's over. Those jobs are all gone. Transportation, gone. Factory work, all of that is gone. But how do you solve the problems around that work? That's where we need people. You might be interested in seeing what some of these questions look like, because it's not just, can you do multiplication off the top of your head? It's not times tables. Here is a sample of some of the math questions that were on the 2022 PISA math assessment. Here's a spreadsheet showing the population in millions and the number of smartphone users in millions for a range of countries in Asia. Which equation on columns B and C will determine the correct values in column D? Column D is for the proportion of smartphone users. So what do? You divide column C by column B. That's what we're lagging behind on. And I think that in a way, that's wonderful news. We don't need to think about math as this raw, rote, boring ass skill set that like never feels like anything that you're really gonna use in real life. It feels like something that you can actually use to solve problems. Here's another one of the puzzles. It has to do with tiles. And there's someone laying tile, a tiler, tiling the floor. And he has two different tiles that he can use, tile A and tile B. Tiling pattern on the right is created using a combination of those. You study the pattern and then use your mouse to drag and drop the tiles into position and finish the pattern. This is the math test that reflects the skills of the future. It's puzzle solving. It's problem solving. I don't know how much time you spent with some of today's teenagers and 20-somethings. Damn, are they smart. They're amazing. And I think if you offer this up as a challenge to them, this they can do. So I'm grateful that I had a really strong math, science, engineering education as a kid. Now, I obviously ended up not being a doctor. I came to my senses and went into something steady like journalism. But that ability to parse information, to think logically, to problem solve is one of the most useful skills I have ever acquired as a journalist. The other set of skills that was super useful was my training in the arts. I always did theater and sang as a kid. My other degree is in theater. And the combination of the arts education I got and the very rigorous science, math, engineering education I got built me into someone who is proficient and ready for the world. I'm very grateful to the people who educated me, especially my educator-in-chief, my mother, who was also a public school educator, for giving me all the equipment I needed to kind of go wherever I wanted to go. If you got a young person who just wants to be an influencer, they're trying to tell you, I want to do what I want to do. Great. Here are the skills that you need to do whatever it is that you want to do, especially if someday you change your mind. Then you've got all the skills you need to pivot. Not because you can do a trigonometric equation, but because you know how to solve a problem and you know how to pivot and adapt. That's the opportunity. And hopefully that'll make our kids' lives way easier in the future. Way easier.